In parts of Tudor-era Britain, an argument in the street could end with an iron cage locked around a person's head. It was called the brank, or more famously, the Scolds bridle. The surviving evidence is uneven, and historians are careful about exactly where and how often it was used. But by the later 16th century, records and examples from Britain show a punishment that feels almost unreal today. It was not designed for secret prisons or distant battlefields. It belonged to ordinary streets. The target was usually a woman accused of being a scold. In early modern language, that could mean quarrelsome, disruptive, abusive, or simply too publicly outspoken for the comfort of neighbours and local authorities. The punishment was brutally symbolic, even when surviving accounts differ on the details. An iron frame was placed over the head. Some versions included a piece that entered the mouth, turning speech itself into the crime and the sentence. Then came the part that mattered most. The person was displayed. Tudor and early modern communities relied heavily on reputation. There were no police forces in the modern sense. Local order was maintained by neighbours, parish officers, magistrates, gossip, and shame. So, a punishment like the brank did not just restrain a body, it sent a message. It said that the community could decide which voices were dangerous, and that is why the Scold's bridle is so unsettling. It was not only about noise or insult, it belonged to a world deeply anxious about hierarchy. Husbands over wives, masters over servants, magistrates over townspeople, rank over disorder. A raised voice could be treated as a crack in the social wall. This does not mean every Tudor village had one hanging by the door ready to use. The record is patchy, and the brank became more clearly documented in some regions than others. But its existence reveals a larger truth about punishment in the period. Law was not only written in books, it was performed in public. The Tudor age used fear, shame, and spectacle to keep daily life inside strict boundaries. And sometimes the strangest punishment was aimed not at what someone had done with their hands, but at what they had dared to say. But iron was only one tool. In Tudor towns, the street itself could become the courtroom. In a Tudor town, punishment did not always happen behind walls. Sometimes it happened in the busiest place available, the market. They're surrounded by neighbours, traders, apprentices, and strangers. A person might be fastened into the stocks or the pillory. These punishments were older than the Tudors, but they remained powerful in Tudor England and Wales because they matched the logic of the age. The point was not simply pain, it was exposure. The stocks usually held the feet. The pillory held the head and hands either way. The punished person was placed where everyone could see them. And that was the sentence. For a modern audience, the strange part is how social the whole system was. A punishment could depend on the crowd. People did not merely witness justice, they completed it, they stared, they mocked. They remembered Tudor authorities used this for many kinds of offenders, especially those who disrupted trust in everyday life. Dishonest traders, public troublemakers, people accused of spreading damaging words. Local crimes were punished locally because the audience was part of the message. If you cheated the town would watch you answer for it. Reputation mattered in a way that is hard to overstate. Your name could decide who would trade with you, employ you, marry into your family, lend you money, or trust your oath. A few hours of public shame could follow a person long after the wooden frame was opened. This was punishment as memory. It also helped rulers and magistrates solve a practical problem. Tudor government did not have the reach of a modern state. It depended on local officers, parish structures, and public obedience. A visible punishment could do the work of 100 warnings. It turned one body into a notice board. That is what makes the pillory so revealing. It was not bizarre, because Tudor people were simply cruel in some cartoonish way. It was bizarre because it shows a society where order was communal, fragile, and intensely public. The law did not only ask whether you had broken a rule, it asked whether your neighbours had seen you break it. And once punishment became a public performance, the boundary between justice and theatre could become dangerously thin. But the Tudors were not only worried about speech trade or reputation. They were also afraid of people who moved through the country with no fixed master, no settled place, and no one to answer for them. In Tudor England, being poor in the wrong place could make you look like a threat. That may be the most revealing punishment. Story of all, the Tudor period was an age of pressure. Population grew, prices rose. Work could be uncertain. Religious houses that had once offered charity were dissolved under Henry VIII. Rural changes pushed some people away from familiar forms of labour and support. To people in power, the roads began to look dangerous. They feared masterless men. They feared wandering beggars. They feared strangers who did not belong to a parish, a household, or a recognised chain of authority. So Tudor law tried to sort poverty into categories. Some people were considered unable to work and therefore eligible for help, at least in limited local ways. Others were treated as idle, suspicious, or criminal. The phrase often used was sturdy beggar. It meant someone thought to be capable of labour, but found begging or wandering instead. The punishments could be harsh, and the details changed across the century. A law in the reign of Edward VI was especially severe toward vagrants, though it was soon repealed. Later Elizabethan laws moved toward a more organised system of poor relief, with parishes made responsible for their own poor. But the deeper idea remained powerful. Poverty was not just a condition, it became something the law tried to inspect, classify and control. The strange detail is how much depended on belonging. Did you have a lawful master? Did your parish recognise you? Were you licensed to beg? Were you seen as unfortunate or as disorderly? The same empty hand could mean two very different things, depending on who was judging it. This is where Tudor punishments stop looking like odd relics and start feeling uncomfortably important. The bridle tried to control speech. The pillory turned reputation into a weapon. The vagrancy laws tried to control movement itself. Together, they show a world where public order was built from visible obedience. The Tudor state was not modern. It could not watch everyone, so it made examples. It used bodies, streets, markets, parish boundaries, and public memory. That is why these punishments still shock us. Not because they were strange for the sake of being strange, but because they reveal how deeply everyday life could be policed long before the modern systems we recognize today